the day of days for America and her allies. Crowds before the White House await the announcement from the president that the Japs have surrendered unconditionally. Reporters rush out to relay the news to an anxious world and touch off celebrations.
After the end of World War II, staggering numbers of young soldiers returned home after fighting overseas. Although the war was over, thousands of young men were still eager to serve their country. And the idea of a government-supported volunteering service was becoming more and more popular. In response to the growing public enthusiasm for the idea, presidential candidate John F. Kennedy decided to add it to his campaign platform. And in 1960, the young senator officially proposed an idea that would eventually become the Peace Corps.
We cannot discontinue training our young men as soldiers of war, but we also want them to be ambassadors of peace. I therefore propose that our inadequate efforts in this area be supplemented by a Peace Corps.
Just weeks later, Kennedy was elected president and reiterated these ideas in his famous inaugural speech.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
Finally, on March 1st, 1961, President John F. Kennedy issued Executive Order 10924, officially establishing the Peace Corps.
I have today signed an executive order providing for the establishment of a Peace Corps on a temporary pilot basis. I'm also sending to Congress a message proposing authorization of a permanent Peace Corps. This Corps will be a pool of trained men and women sent overseas by the United States government or through private institutions and organizations to help foreign countries meet their urgent needs for skilled manpower.
In addition, Kennedy hoped to use the Peace Corps program as a way to counter the growing anti-American sentiment in third world countries that were, at the time, recovering from colonialism.
It will not be easy. None of the men and women will be paid a salary. They will live at the same level as the citizens of the country which they're sent to, doing the same work, eating the same food, speaking the same language.
After President Kennedy's speech, thousands of Americans answered the call to duty by volunteering their services.
Well, let's see. I was a senior in college, and I had a friend who was ahead of me a year and went into the Peace Corps and went to Sierra Leone. And I had several postcards from him from the west coast of Africa, and he was in Sierra Leone on a beach. He had a dugout canoe. He was eating crab and pineapple every night, and it just looked great. And so from that, I think it kind of planted a seed. Maybe this is something I'd like to do.
The program was directed by Kennedy's brother-in-law, R. Sargent Shriver, who was a man known to find and motivate visionary leaders. After a short period of fierce debate with other task force members, Shriver recruited a skilled task force to help bring Kennedy's plan to life. During his first trip abroad, Shriver began to receive offers and invitations from leaders in Ghana, India, and Burma to have volunteers from the Peace Corps placed in their countries. On August 28, 1961, President Kennedy invited the first group of volunteers to the White House to give them a personal send-off.
Just like any other job, you put in an application and they call you back and they start to interview. There's a whole series of interviews. You go through some different levels. There's a medical check and whatnot, and it takes quite a long time. It takes quite a number of months to go through it. They're very thorough. You go the beginning of a summer and they train you for 3 months and then you start. And from that starting point, it's a 2 year.
The volunteers were sent to Ghana, which was one of the first countries to participate in the program. At the program's inception, only 750 volunteers had signed up. The program grew quickly though. By 1963, it grew to 6,500 volunteers, and by 1966, it more than doubled in size with over 15,000 volunteers.
Well, it's very good to be here. I'm Andrew Young, the United States Ambassador to the United Nations, and this is Action, which is the agency that has as part of its portfolio the Peace Corps.
Under the Nixon administration, in 1971, the Peace Corps became a part of a program called Action, directed by Joseph Blatchford. Blatchford was very ambitious and wanted to expand the volunteer work to more countries and to include more volunteers who had different skill sets. Instead of only accepting volunteers who had experience in education and agriculture, they began accepting people who were experienced in things like business and medicine.
For the next decade, we expect to broaden the base of the Peace Corps by reaching out to new types of volunteers, to provide volunteers a new measure of support in the field, to set goals in the programs in which we enter into, and then work ourselves out of jobs as we are able to make a country self-sufficient, or a particular ministry self-sufficient in their area of concern.
Later, President Carter, whose mother served in the Peace Corps as a nurse, returned the program back into an independent government-sponsored organization.
Miss Lillian, as she is still called here, is now the president's mother, and thousands of workers and their families came out to greet her. Some knew her when she worked here 8 years ago. All of them know her now.
This shift allowed the Peace Corps to receive more funding throughout the next few decades. With the average volunteer age of 28, the Peace Corps appeals to recent college graduates who are unsure of what they want to do next.
Well, really, it was a combination of things. I wasn't quite settled on what it was I had studied and what career I wanted to do, so I wasn't quite certain on that. And Peace Corps was a way for me to step back and just kind of reassess my life a little bit, but do it in a way that would gain experience overseas, and also the component of service during that time was that payback was kind of interesting to me too. So those things were what motivated me.
Volunteers in the Peace Corps often find that their experiences from the program have improved their lives. A survey conducted in 1979 revealed that more than 9 out of 10 volunteers felt the program had a positive or extremely positive influence.
I was there for 2 years. I wanted to stay longer, and I wasn't able to stay longer. And I felt like I was just kind of abruptly taken from that culture, thrown back into U.S. culture. And the issue coming back was just not being able to talk to people about it in a way that they could relate or understand. And so I found that to be a difficult thing to do coming back.
Although there were initially only a few countries that received help, there are now 63 host countries. Today, the Peace Corps has helped combat diseases, stop hunger, and educate young men and women in third world countries. With over 35 million people currently living with AIDS, the Corps has worked hard to counteract the spread. Currently, 58% of all volunteers work on HIV-related activities. Recent volunteers have trained over 55,000 local farmers to integrate new farming technology, and with their new initiative called Let Girls Learn, the Peace Corps is making a difference in the lives of young women around the world by combating the gender inequality in education.
Plan to make the Peace Corps theirs as well as ours, to involve nationals of the countries we're working in the recruitment of volunteers, in their selection in this country, in their work overseas, in the providing of support to them, and to even include them on the Peace Corps staff, to set up advisory panels, to set up ways in which the Peace Corps will become Colombian or Chilean or Philippine, rather than just American.